The Pacers just forced the first NBA Finals Game 7 in 9 years. And it was primarily the result of a huge shift in their defensive strategy that left the Thunder completely helpless. A constant theme throughout this playoff run for the Pacers has been their full court pressure. Whether it was Mitchell in the Cavs or Brunson in the Knicks, they've consistently extended their coverage 94 feet, and it had worked beautifully up until the finals. The Thunder were prepared to counter though. In the first 2 games, they ran most of their offense through these high ball screens. And because the Pacers had their bigs out in a soft hedge with no help whatsoever at the nail, Shea consistently got deep in the paint. So in game 3, it was time for the Pacers to counter. They had the big get more aggressive with the pickup point on the hedge, then they parked multiple help defenders in the middle, not letting him get those deep paint touches. The Thunder had 2 more counters up their sleeve though. Firstly, they started running more of these actions through J-Dub as a point because he wouldn't draw as much aggressive help. Secondly, they started setting these ball screens on the complete opposite side of the court, knowing that the big wouldn't be able to pick up while they also couldn't sit those help defenders in any immediate driving lanes. And this final adjustment completely neutralized Indiana's full court pressure as both Shea and J-Dub consistently found themselves getting downhill with an advantage. That takes us to game 6 where the Pacers shocked everyone. For the very first time, they completely abandoned the full court pressure. Now Nembhard is going to pick Shea up at the logo, and from there they'll get really aggressive with their half-court defense. Actually, the half-court approach was really similar to what we saw from them in Game 3. Anytime Shea used a screen from a big, they'd have that aggressive hedge, and if he got around it, they'd send immediate help to the middle of the floor in hopes of getting the ball out of his hands as much as possible. One thing I especially liked though was that they didn't force the hedge. On a play like this where Nembhard never actually makes contact with the screen, instead of jumping out, Turner lets him recover, where he cuts off a drive and forces a turnover. And of course, it was the same thing against J-Dub. He uses a screen from iHeart, Bradley jumps out in a hedge, and there's no advantage created. Then when someone like Wallace looks to create, the Pacers just go to single coverage and make them prove they can score. The attention to detail within Indiana's rotations was amazing. This time OKC goes pick and pop, and Halliburton recognizes it immediately, then steps up to cover Chet. From there, the Thunder don't have an advantage, so they try driving and kicking a couple of times to keep the defense moving, only for Chet to end up getting stopped in the paint. Here's another example from the third of elite rotating. Shea draws the aggressive hedge and looks to drive, while Nesmith sits in the middle of the court to cover both Chet and J-Dub. He closes out up top while Halliburton gets out to the wing, and the result is a semi-contested 3-point attempt from Dort. If you're looking for somewhere to get in on the Game 7 action, I've got the perfect place. Kalshi is the first and only legal prediction market where you can trade on real-world events, and it's the only market in the US where you can trade on this game in all 50 states. If we look at the site right now, you can trade on who's going to win Game 7 or who's going to win Finals MVP. For example, if you think Siakam's going to win MVP, Kalshi gives you a 21% chance, meaning that $100 would return $477. If that's not your thing, you could go for when LeBron's going to retire, who's going to be the number 3 pick in the draft, or even something like Joey Chestnut winning the hot dog eating contest. Kalshi has markets on almost everything: politics, movies, music, crypto, sports, and more. They have over 1 million users in all 50 states and have facilitated over $2 billion worth of trades. So put your money where your mouth is and sign up using my link in the description, and the first 500 traders that trade 100 contracts will get a free $10 credit. Because the spread pick and rolls were getting bottled up, the Thunder pivoted away from those actions and instead turned to their smaller guards as primary screeners. Only, the Pacers adjusted here as well. Before they were hedging, now they're switching. And the obvious response to that from OKC would be to isolate Shea, because now he's up against a more favorable matchup. But after the switch, Nembhard's job was now to shadow Shea wherever he went on the court, which was simply a genius tactic. The best way I can describe this coverage is a switch into a late double. TJ picks up Shea, but Nembhard never leaves the ball, so by the time he gets near the paint, he's seeing 2 bodies. Wallace is wide open up top, but he's unable to knock it down. And that's exactly what the Pacers wanted. Instead of letting Shea or J-Dub get downhill, they forced these guys to make a decision between whether or not they wanted to move the ball and trust their teammates to make threes, or if they wanted to settle for really tough mid-range jumpers. It's not like they can't still score in these spots. Indiana just didn't want them getting anything easy, so after Shea gets a switch, Nembhard parks in a driving lane, forcing him to look for a mid-range jumper over the top. Here's one from the third, where Caruso screens Nembhard away from the ball and immediately clears out to give Shea the middle. Only Nembhard doesn't leave, and Toppin crowds that space with a late double from up top, so there's nowhere for him to go. And I want to talk about that double from Toppin because that was another key adjustment from the Pacers. Even if he had Nembhard on him, anytime he tried to play one-on-one, they'd send a late double from up top in hopes of taking away the middle. Again, forcing other guys to make plays. This was the first time in this series where they decided to outright double Shea, and I think it really caught both him and the team off guard, which probably played a role in him recording a career-high 8 turnovers. It was the exact same thing whenever they cleared a side for him to post up. Whoever's up top is going to come with a double, while everybody else shifts one pass up to take away immediate passing options. Again, their rotations really stood out. Shea draws a double, Siakam covers Caruso while TJ tags J-Dub, and Toppin's a bit late getting out to Wiggins, but they'll live with the 3. The Thunder tried moving Shea to the elbow as a counter, but again, with that double coming from up top, they could force these role players to make 3s, and to say they didn't would be an understatement. This game was over by the start of the 4th, so I think it makes more sense to look at any numbers before that point. And through 3 quarters, the Thunder were an ice-cold 3 of 20, or 15% from 3. So if you're someone who likes to project forward and think about what might happen in Game 7, you can probably assume a few more of those jumpers go their way. It wasn't just on the ball where they switched up how they defended Shea though. If you remember the 3 games before this, Nembhard was face guarding him and denying the ball. This meant that they could use him as a decoy to create space for J-Dub, because if the ball went towards him, there wouldn't be any help at the nail. In Game 6, they got away from this strategy and had Nembhard active in help, which played a big role in limiting J-Dub's ability to run the point. It could be something so subtle. Before there wasn't help at the nail, now there's a stunt, and just that little difference can turn what would be a deep paint touch into a long 2 from Shea. The other adjustment in relation to J-Dub had to do with his matchup. There were a few stints throughout the game where they threw Siakam on him as a primary defender. Nesmith's an awesome perimeter defender, but he's had some trouble with Jalen due to the way he initiates contact and how much added length he has. With Siakam, there's no size or length advantage, and for someone who relies on that as a driver, he wasn't able to create the same sort of opportunities. So between the added size and length on the ball and extra help from Nembhard, less driving lanes meant more jump shot reliance, which ended up hurting both of OKC's stars. Like I said earlier, I think the first 3 quarters do a great job of depicting just how bad of an offensive performance this was from the Thunder. During those 3 quarters, they had an offensive rating of just 82. For reference, over the entire playoff run, they've averaged about 115. Between the lack of 3-point shooting, the lack of paint touches, and the turnovers, this was a brutal showing and a truly masterful defensive performance from the Pacers. Actually, there was a span from the end of the second to the start of the third where they were scoreless for 6 minutes and 49 seconds, which is actually the longest scoring drought in a finals game in the last 20 years. So I think that's a good place to land the ship. With Game 7 on the horizon, it's gonna either take some major fixes from the Thunder or some major improvements to their execution to defend home court and win the championship. Because based on what we saw in the last game, you could make an argument that the cards are in Indiana's hands. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out the Hoop Venue podcast and my social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of this series. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.